for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved, divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome again to a video with me. I'm mobile again, finally, after a super long time, probably been around almost 2 years now, well, somehow, and I really wanted to drive. I felt this pull to drive this mountain pass we have here, and it's been such a long time, and I really didn't feel it, as I used to. I used to be such a mountain goat, and I really always felt so deeply connected to this place. And I've shared with you before that the strangest thing happened, because as a creation pillar, I literally grew roots here for these past 7 years since I moved here in 2013 to these Alps. And so I really had this strong urge for probably a year now, as you know, longer, to move. And it just didn't happen. And a lot of it is a long story, dealing with a lot of dark forces as well that have been hijacking our timelines. And I could have moved in the timeline around 2 years ago, and I didn't, because they manipulated it. So it's pretty frustrating, because now the situation got very toxic, and in a way it was part of my training, but it was also very difficult for me to just live a normal and decent human life. So the first step was made, and I actually got a car again, and it's a mini car in comparison to what I had. And I came here and just driving, and I was activating this, liberator within me, because it's always been there. No matter how life is difficult and hard for me, it's just like, it's in me. So I was driving this pass, I always was like this super badass mountain driver. I was like, feeling it, But when I came to this place, I don't feel it in the same way as I used to. I always had these tears in my eyes, Now I had tears, but for a different reason. It just didn't feel the same anymore. It was like, oh, it's gone, the connection. Because last week, I've actually, as I've shared with you, I've uprooted my essence from here. It's like my spirit was moved. And it was the most tremendous experience that sort of created this lag behind, which meant I was going through this deep, it's almost like a cosmic hangover, if you know what it means. It was very difficult for me. This week was tremendously challenging, because the moment this happened, and this was last Saturday, I was super elevated. But then the next day I felt like totally crashed and burned. And it was like, I have no home. I'm homeless. It felt like I literally am this vagabond traveler, gypsy, cosmic gypsy, just going from, one nature space to another. And yet I have no home. I have no stability. I have no rooting. And sort of my challenge was to now bring these roots within myself again, so I can grow them now within myself. So I went from anchoring to being the anchor, the pillar, to just being this uprooted force. And Spirit literally showed me I need to be like, the feather, which, it's like the wind currents are playing with it. And it's like you have to become very loose. And I was just toying around with this the entire week, and I was feeling very heavy and burdened and challenged, because, when you've already moved in spirit, but somehow your body is still there. It was really challenging. So the past few days I cried a lot. You know me, I share in the raw format that this life is for me. And I want to go deeper into this today, because I've talked in general, how it's important for us to first notice the false light. As you know, I'm very passionate about speaking about false light, because it's a reality that keeps people in a certain status quo, and they think they're awake, but they're actually not. There's a lot of people actually who've experienced awakening and thought that was it, but then they were taken into tremendous darkness, because they were shown this is the work, this is what you're going to be doing, this is what we're doing. And many light beings here are intentionally embodied for the purpose of resurrecting through this darkness, and embodying and resurrecting the Christ, as we know this pure essence of purest love to be. And it's a consciousness that's not separate from our body. So I'll talk about this today as well, how this represents in our life. So it's been challenging, right? And there's been a lack of compassion in this whole community, because, this is not something you can just pass through someone saying, oh, just keep your thumbs up, or, keep the goodwill, or it's okay, be happy, continue to be happy, or, think positive. this journey of Christ challenges I've talked about and embodying, you know, it's not just how the world responds and reacts, but it's an overall this union that we create and perform within our inner being, the dweller, the inner human child, as I call it. So for me, physically, this life was so difficult. My living situation it wasn't just difficult, you know, like, okay, it's not pleasant, it's not the best, it's not optimal, it's not the home of your dreams, but it was literally me living. And I was feeling this because, as you know me, I'm a seer. I see things, I feel them, and I know them to be the truth. And I'm literally I was living in this building that's actually a portal for these dark forces, and they were like hanging over me like these dark clouds, and I called them the whispers. And whenever I found myself to come home, it's like the energy instantly dropped, because they were like, you know, hovering over me and basically trying to keep me there, because, you know, as a source providing lots of food, you know. And I've been realizing how this is playing out, and I was needing to be much smarter and wiser than then, which we are. But as you know, the human self has challenges, and it often gets tired and depleted and exhausted. So the will sometimes wanes a bit, and it's difficult to stay in our optimal well-being so we can actually pierce through that. So for me, I always say it like it is, and I say sometimes the darkness wins and sometimes they don't, because it's all waves and it's gradual. But I witnessed so much of these responses, you know, with people just going, oh, you know, just stay positive and all will work out. And, you know, the journey of Christ embodiment is not about things just working out or you being positive. It's like a totally different trajectory, because you're aiming for a complete embodiment and merging of spirit in your body, which means that you cannot exclude the human experience from it. Remember, like 2 years back when I still had my old car, I made a video about the key being this human child, and I didn't have many views. It's like people don't get it. And everyone is trying to, you know, go deeper into the pursuit of their spirit, but the spirit already is. It's like how to bring this spirit into the body consciously plus unconsciously, and, you know, consider all these aspects and see how the human child has become, in a way, often traumatized because of this experience of just the path alone. Because the Christ embodiment path literally takes all of you. It engulfs all of you, which means that the initiations of spirit can sometimes be so intense that the inner child, like our human self, which is a component of who we are, and it's very important. It's actually factually the most important component, and this is why I don't resonate with most of the spiritual teachings, because they negate the human and they're very vertical. And they don't understand creation. They might understand spiritual, esoteric meanings of life, but they don't understand the essence of life, and that's the difference. Because it's through the remembrance of life, moving through our physicality, that life becomes more, and this is how we expand. So for those of us who are here as the lumen light beings, most of us have not been here before, but we've done this work elsewhere. But it doesn't make it any less challenging, because now where we are, Earth is the most bombarded and most held captive with this dark force is doing everything. You know, it's difficult not just to say, well, we're keeping the darkness at bay. Well, that's the easier part. The more challenging part is to illuminate through it. And so for many light beings, it's been like a constant struggle and suffering. And I've talked to many as well, those who are very much on this path, because even though you might consider yourself to be, you haven't perhaps fully stepped onto it, which means you're really going to do this integration work, which is quite comprehensive and extensive in a way. So those who are truly in this path, these are usually beings who are now we're going through this tremendous shaking period. It's like a rumble and tumble, and for many of us it feels like it's how I felt for the past few months. It's like it was difficult and unbearable sometimes to just stay alive, to just keep on breathing and remember I can do this, because it often felt like I can't. And I felt like quitting and going back and, you know, crying out, like putting my intention out into the sky and through my voice and my being, just calling out for this divine mercy to come. But it's not like something just comes and drops out of the sky like we imagine it to be often. And people who are not pursuing this path yet, or haven't really stepped through committing to doing the work of union, and they're staying just in the light and often very vertical, they're not going to feel this darkness pushing and pulling on them as intensely and so strongly, because the moment you kind of step onto it, you break through this threshold, it's when these challenges actually begin. And that's why some people are literally telling me their last, let's say, year or so, 2 years, like it was for me as well, have been tremendously difficult. And it wasn't like this fairy tale that most of us imagined this to be when we were reading scriptures or watching videos about the new earth, and it was everything but that, because this is again, this path is tremendously difficult when you're going through the thick of it, and you can't see, well, you're in that narrowest pathway, you can't see like beyond it. And I know there's a reason for that, and I felt it like before. I always felt a deep alignment, and I still do, with the universal, well, grand design or divine plan of perfection. But in this stage, like the human child was saying, no, I can't see or feel anything. It's all in vain. This purpose, what we came here for, what we've sacrificed our human bodies for, it's all, means to no end. And it felt like giving up. And basically, as you know, giving up is easy, giving in is not. Because when you give in, you're actually surrendering to aspects of life that are yet unknown and therefore more challenging for you to embrace. So it's been very difficult, because you're walking this path, and sometimes people come along and they're going to say they understand, but they don't, and they give you these kind of superficial responses like, yeah, just do this, or we've talked about this, right, with the spiritual knowledge and all, and they're just, you receive, or you're pouring out, and just this pure genuine authenticity, like putting yourself out there all the way, just representing and demonstrating the path, because it's something you can't teach, you can just demonstrate it yourself. And then you get these responses clearly indicating that people don't understand, and it's because, like I said, they don't have an integration point in their awareness yet, and they haven't fully stepped onto that next stage of the development themselves. But today I want to talk about the resurrection of the beloved. And many people have different associations with the word beloved. For many, it's the other, it's the counterpart, it's their love, it's the romantic twin soul, twin flame, whatever. For me, the beloved is basically this third component of the union, which is you, your counterpart, and what you're creating in the union. So the beloved is this whole triangle. And when you're really in this beloved essence, you're feeling both the mother, father, and the child, all aspects, the trinity of creation, of life. And you're feeling, when you're in that point of triangulation, you're feeling as life itself. And I made a video a while ago, right? The essence of life. And how to fully step into it. But because these waves have been so difficult and obstructive, like for me, I felt it like, for example, narrowing it down, like I would have one good day in 7 days a week. That's little. That's 1/7, right? In proportion. And it's like tremendously difficult to live this way, because all the other days is just like getting through the murk of it, and it was just getting denser and denser. Because if I imagine back like 7 years ago when I first moved here, I was at this elevation point, and was driving these mountain roads and hiking and walking and just experiencing the nectar of life, which I call the anointing of the beloved, right? So on Patreon, in my group work called Ascension, basically whole last year we've talked about these things, because I do these Union readings, and consensually, where it comes and the steps that we were moving through, that I was basically integrating where I was, and then people who take in what resonates for them and their path. But literally the anointing of the beloved is like that, when you're feeding that flame, and the flame is the spiritual fire that when you come to earth, you don't have at your full capacity. So you have to anoint the beloved, right? And meaning that when life is beautiful, and when you're in that elevated or the ascended state, so a lot of us have already been ascended, right? But then what I experienced a few years after that was literally a downfall, which meant like I jumped into the depth of, it's like it was a commitment on the behalf of my spirit through my physical being. The commitment was made that I jump into the deepest parts of what life in this creation is. And then to move through these stages gradually, one by one, which was probably the most difficult part of it all. And as I was moving through these, it was like layers and layers, and each was just unveiling more difficulty and more. And at a certain point it felt like, is this all that life is about? So the flame, that spiritual fire, which I would feel is this purest love, that's how I feel it myself. And it's when you're in this beloved essence, it's like everything speaks to you, the music, the nature, the song, the other. Like in that moment, let's say you meet someone, anyone can be your counterpart in that moment. That's why people sometimes when they're in the beloved essence get confused. Well, is that my twin flame? Because when you're in that essence, you can experience anyone who's going to hold that mirror, because that's what they come in your life in that moment. Sometimes it's just a day, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's months or longer. But in any case, you're in that essence, so you're feeling the surge and you're just like feeding yourself with it, right? So imagine like 7 years ago, I was in the nectar of life and I was just feeding myself and I was causing this beloved essence. And that's when I channeled all these beloved drawings and music and all of that, right? The art, everything went into that. But it didn't occur physically for me as in coming of the other person. For me, again, this is my path and the trailblazing that I came here as my forte to present and experience myself, was the descent. Like I had to gradually bring that elevated state, and I'll carry it into all aspects, like going deeper and deeper each time, and then bring them to the deepest part of, like, we can literally say that it could sink in. So bringing it to the sink, the bottom of that sink. And at that bottom, we could say, lies a pearl. And that pearl is not of wisdom. The pearl is of, again, of illumined union that I talk about. And the illumined union is, if you manage in any realm and anywhere you are to crystallize the experience, no matter what it was, and come out on the other end, this pure pearl, right, that purest light, then you've actually resurrected the Christ. So, and our illumined being trajectory, which is what we do, that's our narrative. That's how we come into realms and infuse realms of creation with purest love. And it's a sacrifice. I don't like to use that word, but that's what it is. And I do a lot of beloved poems, and sometimes on Patreon, when I do these readings month per month, I read them out, or, it just depends what is a part of that guidance. But a lot of these, for me, how I feel my union to be is pure sacrifice. And it's knowing that this is infinitesimal part, and it is such a major part, because we might say, oh, it's just one tiny human part, it's not as important, we always go back to spirit. But my path was different. It was emerging with spirit and knowing that every experience counts, and every experience does affect the physical, and then the physical does impact the spirit. So this conjoined union and merging not just of the polarities of masculine and feminine, which is this, right, the horizontal infinity symbol, but then spirit and matter. So these conjoined, because that's how I see this union, built of two infinity symbols, right? And that's also in all my artwork that I did. It was a part of my own embodiment, right? Through that essence of purity, of that love. And it was like to bring the purest love here, because it wasn't experienced. That seed was so needed, and that seed was the pearl dropped into the densest aspect, into the matter, into void, into that most, let's say, an aspect that never knew light. And when we do that, we're like pushing through that system, that oppressive force, which is literally, it's literally programmed to resist any type of Christhood, any nature. So that's why you actually start to get resistance once you actually start to demonstrate Christ embodiment yourself. When you're in the intellectual part of it and just grasping on it, just feeding yourself with information about that, or you're not going to experience that yet because you haven't put your foot down, you haven't made that first step. So usually people who are not on that part of the paved road yet, they're not going to feel this intensity. So for them, right, when someone like me or someone who's also experiencing this thickness of it all, they're not going to understand, and they would give these responses based on their own experience, because we only make assumations from our own experience. That's how the majority of humanity works. So in my mission and purpose, it was to understand, not intellectually, but through feeling, how the human feels, and all the layers of the human experience, which are all the colors. It wasn't just the color of magic, like Terry Pratchett books. It's amazing books, though, where science meets fiction and becomes something surreal. So in this matter, right, the inner child held this key, and because of that, the forces of darkness, the forces that continuously want to, that's what we call the Antichrist, because they're literally against the Christ. They don't know this purity. They don't know this immaculate design. They don't know this pure stuff. So they're literally, their natural programming is to resist it, and resisting brings a heavy oppression energy, this thickness that we know, right? So when the light beings come and they drop into this plane of existence with this thickness, for us it's suffering. And it's painful sometimes when you speak to these people who are also light beings to just be in human bodies, because you have this purest intel within, and then the reality at large is anything but that. And it's difficult sometimes just to stay alive. And that's how I felt for the last 2 years. Like, I'm just here to just stay alive, to not give up. Like literally these thickest moments of the mission here, you're breaking through like the last crevice point, right? It's like like you can't see anything the way you used to before. I couldn't even relate to feelings. I had memories. Like let me give you an example. I had a memory how I went to these mountains and climbed them, but I couldn't relate to feeling anymore. The feeling was dissociated from where I'm now, or vice versa, right? And so because of this knowing, and the divine union is formulated through the christening of the inner child, this human self, this is what we're here for. Intellectually, you don't do anything. You don't literally change the system. You don't break through the system. You can't do it. That's where you're not a threat. You're not a danger, and you're not going to have those darkness pushing against you and throwing darts at you, and you're not going to get these mini punishments, as I call them, that we've literally experienced, all of us who are light beings here. And some of the light beings have been on earth many times before, because that's how they assisted this realm, and that was their end of the experience. And some of them, like me, we were not here, and we were doing different level of work, and so we recognize each other as family almost instantly. And that's why usually people who find me are these beings too, but most beings who find me have been on earth before, but sometimes there's also the new ones. But usually I feel them as they're out there doing their own work. So it's kind of like this field work, right, of integrating. It's not healing. It has nothing to do with healing the inner child. It's not what I'm talking about. So if you have a programming as to what I'm wording out, it's not the same thing. The healing of the inner child, right, the patterns, the ancestral things and lineages, this is a whole other thing. This is that the next level of this path, right, this requirement for it. So even if, let's say, you're in this path and you would go to a healer, they wouldn't have an understanding because they haven't set out the platform themselves. So they would relate your experience within a framework they're willing to work with, or they can understand, right? Because it's all based on comprehension. Without understanding, you can't function, right? You just can function through your own understanding. And it's difficult to relate our experiences to any kind of external means this way, because these people have not yet had an experience. So we have to be very careful. And because of that, we often feel alone, because it's a stage we're in that not a lot of people are at. Remember, in the past previous video, I talked about only a small percentage of people who've literally stepped into this part of the Christhood and this embodiment path, right? So it's not a lot of people there. So the moment you step like fully and it becomes such a commitment, you begin to struggle, and life feels like, why is life now suddenly different? And you think, is it the collective? Are we collectively experiencing this? Well, it is partially. We're all experiencing this heaviness of the collective, but this, what I'm talking about today, is not the same thing. This specifically relates to this Christ path. So there's a lot of information, as you know, and a lot of it is real, where the collective is, you know, moving from 3D, 4D, 5D, all that. But this is different. This is moving into Christhood, which, you know, wherever kind of D density, right, you're in, you're just in that density, but doesn't particularly affect the nature of this purpose, which is, in the end, in a nutshell, let me just specify it more so that I don't stray off too much. It's like literally bringing up through this point of elevation the inner child, and through the process of descent, the child becomes wounded. It's just, again, not the same as healing the inner child from past trauma, parents, you know, lineages, blah blah. This is the first line of the journey, right? So this part is literally because of the experience of christening, right, dropping down and descending the light of what you experience as this ascension to be. It's like you're moving like gradually through layers, and during that process, because you are human and you are physical and you have physiological nature to you, not just like psychological, right? It's both, and it's interconnected. Like psychology, physiology, they're interdependent. We all know that, right? Everything functions as a one giant organism of life, and no body of work that we are all a part of is excluded from this equation of life. So basically, what I mean by this is that because of the experience of the descent itself, the child, the inner child, becomes weakened and frustrated at times and tired and wounded, right? Because of that. It's not wounded in the same way, right, as this was done to you and this, because literally, when you're in that part of the path, it's not like someone can do something to you because you're very awake, you're very alert, and it's not like physically something done to you. But these forces work through the essence, and it's like literally life begins to resist you because you're pushing through the current. And in one of the recent channelings with the beloved Master Jesus said, like, you've been so far successfully traveling against the current, successfully, he said. But I feel like when you come to this bottom of the pit, which I call the pitch black part, it's like you're starting to feel that, like this feeling, now something needs to change. But it's like it takes a lot of energy, because during the descent part, it got very frustrating and very dark for the inner child. It's like traumatic, right? Imagine like you're in the top of this cliff, now you have to jump into the valley where there's stuff and you don't know, and it's a lot of heaviness, and all of a sudden from this pure, refined breeze, right, all this amazing, energetic, infinite open space and potential, you have to jump into density and being squeezed in. So I've been feeling like squeezed for the past like year and a half or 2 years. It's been so difficult. Like I couldn't even be myself. Like I couldn't feel the joy of my inner child. And my inner child, I loved that baby. I mean, I still do. I don't mean it like in a past tense, like it died, but it felt like killed off. Like there's aspects of it that were killed off during the process. It's how it felt, but not literally. They were just hiding, right? They were under the lid. They were there. It was like, it's like hidden potential. And they were unopened or unactivated because all of the life force went into this descent part. So because now coming to this narrowest point and the bottom of that sink, it was difficult to resurrect the beloved flame. And for me, the beloved flame is this joy when I'm in my inner child and when I sing these beloved songs and when in the union state. And just yesterday I heard this guidance because someone from this beautiful online world reached out to me in such a beautiful way, and we had a little of the conversation. It was beautiful, and we sort of had, you know, this topic, this, you know, it can't be just this, there has to be more, this love. And just at the same point in that day, I felt like this dying off, this dying of the vision of the beloved. It's like, it's never going to happen. It's always going to be like this, like almost like you can no longer see your future. It felt that dark. And I was crying like for the whole day, like giving up on that vision and tearing up old letters and beloved stuff that I was doing. And I just felt like I needed to do that at the same point, because it was like releasing, right? It was like dismantling the ideas of what and how. And through that process, I felt like it's starting to resurrect. I started to feel it again, and it's been like this for a while now. Like I could feel it resurrect a bit, and then it's like it went down again, and then again and down. Because just like they're telling me now, that's amazing, I haven't gotten this information. It's like when I speak, I get into this channel mode. It's interesting. For me, it's vice versa. Like most people need to meditate. When I meditate, I don't receive much. I have to walk, I have to move, and then I receive everything almost. What I need to receive in the moment, right? That's what falls into the category of everything. So, bye-bye, fly. Anyway, it's like just as the descent is gradual, then the illumination process is gradual as well. So you feel a little flicker and then again off, and a little flicker off and then again. So that's what I've been feeling for the past, like I think it's 7 months now, that I was trying to resurrect this Christ and embody this illumined union, which for me is the third stage, is this christening. And christening is not like religious ceremony. Like from a lumen being perspective, a christening is this process when you're illuminating the inner child, and it's the human self gradually becoming the self, but not as it used to be. It's new, so that's why it's so scary and difficult, because it hasn't been this before. So like if you're trying to reconnect back to the old, like I used to be like this, right? I used to go to these mountains, I was feeling this and that, and I go, it doesn't feel the same, because it's not now through a connective link. Like I used to be an anchor here, and it could resound with a lot of frequency through that connection. Now it's like it's all within me. Like these mountains became me, like I became them, for example. That's what I want to say now. And it's been such a process that what they're showing me now, it's like a gradual like descent, because remember, ascension is the threefold process, and I even teach it in one of my basic courses, right? These self-mastery courses that I created like years ago, and they're just for the beginner stages, so people can have a platform of understanding. But when you're in these advanced stages, like it's just basic information, right? You're surpassing that and you're going beyond, but we all start from the foundation, right? That's where we start. And so I explained this, how ascension is this awakening and ascending that is descending, and it's the resurrection part, which is the illumination. It's like that light which dropped to the very core of darkness of the human experience, to the very droplet where the seed of life is contained, and to rewrite it completely. Remember, last year I've talked about the seed of illumination being planted on earth. It was like a collective, and because the seed was planted onto earth, our bodies are part of the earth. Our bodies can now start resonating with that and resounding with that frequency. And so there was a lot of bombardment against that, and it was difficult for us, and we might have had a feeling of lagging behind, delays, like being derailed, taken off course. But again, I'm being told it's all part of the process, and we can't always understand it from the human perspective. But each time when the human rises a bit, right, you're anchoring again this illumined perspective, and it helps to pull it upwards. And then again and again, it happens in these tiny increments of light, right? Because it would be too much. Again, I'm being shown it would be too much all at once to resurrect. That's how people imagine it, right? Like we have this visual of Jesus, right, dying on a cross, but basically resurrecting and ascending. But literally, he wasn't alive anymore. What we're doing now, an illumination part of this process at this time on earth, is resurrecting, and we're staying in the body, and we're ascending physically these bodies through the process, so that darkness could no longer be a part of this. Because the moment you can illuminate the experience, it can no longer touch you. And in one of my recent experiences, like I've told you, Holy Spirit said, I now fully claim this body when I did this procedure, because I went all the way back to my birthing point, which I'll talk about on Patreon in this month's transmission. Well, next month, right? It's almost now. So this process was difficult, and it was difficult to feel that anointed flame of the beloved. And I was told by Spirit, yes, the flame might have extinguished, and darkness can do that, and it has many ways and means. But they never kill off the flicker, that tiny spark. And remember, even like with the actual physical fire, all it takes is a spark, and you can reignite it at any time. And you don't even need equipment. What you need is you need the breath, right? So this is symbolic of this breath of life. What this means is that there's a gradual illumination process going on, and this is where I am now, right? Resurrecting the Christ. And then I have these videos coming up here, talk to you, very excited, like I've resurrected, and again, it's like, oh, it's just one part. And when I'm being shown now, it's this gradual process, and that's why it feels like a never-ending, like treading through these murky waters. And if you find yourself there, you have to know in which part of the process you are, which I cannot tell you, and no one can. You have to work with Spirit. For me, I'm married to Holy Spirit. That's, for me, the highest form of union is being married in sacred union with Holy Spirit. It's the pure essence of life, and all else drops out of that, even what we call the twinning nature of our soul, the twin soul, and all of these aspects. But the first aspect is this, for me, it's this pure nature of life, which is the essence of life itself, Holy Spirit. And and most of these cases for me felt very dark, like I can't do it. I'm just gonna be left alone here. And in this increments, because the human dweller needs to do this, the human counterpart has to be the one doing this. Otherwise, you cannot become illumined from the outside. That's why at that stage, it feels like all the guidance system, it all goes away. There was a point in my life where I felt totally connected to my group. They were there. It was like every day was an adventure. And now it's like, oh, every day is an adventure in how to be alone and do this. Like, I can't, but I have to. I've chosen it, and I know that, and it's freaking killing me at times. Physically, I've lost probably most of my weight, half of my hair, because it took such a tremendous life force to do this. And I hope that on the other end, on the other side, once I'm there, the regrowth process of everything in my body, like this replenishment and blossoming into life, happens again. But I can know. Because, as you know, I share along the way. I share where I am now, and this is the embodiment. It's not a teaching that's, the epitome of something that it's like a work that's been established. This is something that's new. So I can only talk about it when I go and pass these stages myself, right? So each time I resurrect the beloved a little more, it's like the flame will start like flickering a bit more, and then sometimes it will die off again. But it doesn't die, like completely, ever. This is the part that we say, the part of us that no darkness can touch, and we all have that part. So you have to learn how to access that part. And you do that by anointing the beloved. And sometimes when you're totally down, like in the trenches, when I feel at the lowest point, I've told you this many times before, like how often this has been. It's like when I was at my lowest point, that was literally the same point, the entrance into resurrection, that aspect of it. So it's like the darkest tunnel was at the same time as the entrance into the light tunnel. and the vision, the opening. And it's what people don't understand when you're going through this. You're very vulnerable, and people will start to misinterpret you and what you're about, what you're sharing, what you're talking about, because they don't understand. So face your vision, go straight forward, be bold. Don't let yourself be convinced into other narratives of life, because if you're truly on this path, you will know. And there will be no one who's going to be able to, pull you or drag you down or tell you, what are you talking about anyway? People push at you, It's been so difficult for me, because with all my difficult life situations, because I didn't even have a peaceful platform, I didn't have a home, I didn't have a stability, I didn't have a base, and I had to do this work anyway. It's like I kept saying to myself the entire winter, I can't do this here, not in this building, not in this spot, not in this way. I can't do it. No, I kept telling myself I can't. I need to first move or be in a different space, and then I can do it. But all this time, Spirit was saying, no. It's exactly where you're doing it here, because it's a part of the plan, right? That's why it has to be so difficult. And when you're sharing with others, like I say, the most often based conclusion would be, oh, you're suffering, you must not be enlightened yet, you have weak points, you have ancestral work, you have this and that. And you will know. Like if someone recently told me, this when I went into my birth, right, my birthing point, and it was like, this is ancestral. But I felt, no, it's more, it's something different. So I had to channel from my own spirit what it was all about, and I'll talk about it in the Patreon's transmission, this self-sovereign birthing. So it's challenging, it's intense, but we are here to know that this love, this purest love, this love, what we came here for, and this will be a part of this month's, I think, Lumen Union transmission or channel guidance on Patreon, is like, we have these points when we're really ready to give up, and we say, what was even the point if we can't have this physical experience of it? It was all a waste. It was all for nothing, right? Means to no end. And that's usually when a turnover happens, but we cannot expect that the turnover will be like that majestic arrival of something or someone or a circumstance that pulls us out of this. It's like a gradual ascent of our own descension. It was because it was already there, it's already established, because that's where the interconnecting link comes from. You know it. Like for me, right? Because the Lumen beings, we do it this way. For people who are ascending the first time, it's the same process. It's just like they have a lesser extent to remembrance how being ascended feels. So they have to struggle at the first part of the ascension, right? For us, for Lumen beings, it's very difficult because we kind of jump in and we descend. We actually descend so we can assist others in this realm and to bring this liberation. We wouldn't have to do that. But we volunteered, we vowed to make this possible and plausible so people can join this path, because it's no longer just a teaching in a scripture. That's why I get so nervous and upset when it's all that people make this about. It's so easy to read about the Christ and have your own assumption what the Christ is about, or what even Jesus' experience was. What the frick? No one knows. It's like his experience was one tiny droplet in an ocean that was so super important, but it was his, and only he knew all of it within his oversoul, right, understanding, and his trials and what it was for, not just for himself personally, but right as his own volunteering part. And that's why people get so quickly opinionated and think what this is about, but they're not even, yet or have stepped on it fully with that next stage. In the previous video, we've talked about 3 stages. It's not so easy. You have to know where you are, and then you have to know, I'm here. Yes, it's freaking difficult, but this is the part, and that's why it's now the most difficult. So when I speak to people, I often feel like, oh my gosh, I'm talking about all these difficult stuff. I don't want to sound like this. Am I off-pulling? It's like, I don't want to, it's not the same as when you're complaining, right? It's like, I never was the kind of person that it's like, I come into victim mode, I just like to share. And sometimes people would project and think like you want something from them, and you don't. It's like, all I'm doing is just sharing. Because like I said, this year I was trying to demonstrate this pure Christ compassion that it's arising within us due to the experience itself. It's not the same as fall. The dissension is not the same as fall of consciousness. The fall in consciousness is, when beings actually, they disconnect, they disengage from what we call pure light of source. And these fallen angelics and these that becomes, they want to separate themselves. They want to become individual identities existing outside of source, like almost like trying to consume life with their own essence, like becoming source or like source, but they can't because they're just a part of being birthed through source. And that, as you know, leads to aspects and levels of major control. So the descent is not the same as being fallen. I often say the fall, you know, when my fall began. It's not being a fallen being, you know, it's not the same. So we have to really be in the space of knowing to tell a difference what's what. Otherwise, we're just hokey pokey speaking empty words that we've learned or picked up somewhere along the way. It's not the same as truly being an illuminator, right? Sorry, I'm swallowing my words today. I speak so fast. I think it must be the mountains, because when I come here, although it's not the same feeling as it used to be, but it's like this, the energy is really high here, and you must have noticed, like, you can't see them because they're on the other side, and it's cloudy and it's foggy as well a bit. It's not the warmest of spring, but the energy is there. So you might feel it coming through the screen, coming through the energetics. Remember, it's like when you connect to something, even though it was recorded like hours ago or days ago, like when you're in it, you're in that moment, and it connects with you through the no time or no time continuum, right? Through that 0 point. So that's how we truly connect. That's when you're connecting with something that's being shared. You're not just tuning in and listening and picking it up. You're literally connecting. So that's why people who are open in this way would say, oh, I felt this. Or sometimes people even told me they could smell the mountains coming through the screen, or they could just feel themselves being in the same space. Or, you know, it's like because you're literally connecting within that point. So yeah, Resurrecting the Beloved is very challenging. I hope to bring through a beautiful reading for this month. But then I have to share, I am in the transition, right? I don't know yet. I don't have the outcome, but like we're finding this new place because this is becoming unbearable. Like the body now needs to be moved as well because the body is not separate from spirit. So that's why I get super, super annoyed, like terribly annoyed when people mistaken these two. Like you have to transcend the human nature. It's like, no, illumination is to bring that spark into the human nation. It's like the opposite of what the vertical perspective is showing. And it demonstrates an enlightened being, someone who's always like this. Life is not like that. Look at nature. Life is vast, it's diverse. Sometimes it's raw, sometimes the weather is beautiful, sometimes it's cold and vile and a little scary. You know, this contrast is such a training experience for all of us. But I've noticed that each time I resurrect, what happens is I return to this beloved flame, and I have to reignite it a bit and bit by bit. And I would feel, oh, it's done. I'm back. You know, in a moment I do feel I'm back. But then again, there's more and there's more, because again, it's a gradual process. So I hope this sharing would help you in informing yourself that you know you're not going crazy, that there's nothing wrong with you, that it's not just the collective, that this is what the experience is. And I know I talked to only a few of you who are actually here now at the stage, but some might follow later, I don't know, or you might be the ones who are passing the torch onwards in your own way when you meet people who are somehow coming to you for that purpose, for that reason. So it's all interconnected. I'm just putting it out there, telling it like it is, because I'm living it. And because of that, I notice a lot of this separation between spirit and the physical self, or what we call sometimes the persona. And that's why I got really agitated in the last few updates on my Patreon page, because someone in the group was trying to present this false narrative, like, oh yeah, but you know, like nothing beats this eternal nature of spirit, and then the human persona is like this persona. Like, yeah, I have this ego persona, that's why I have these challenges in life. Just throw me in a box, right? Just throw me in this black and white box. It's like, you know, and then I step up for myself. It's not just for myself. It's not defending the self. It's defending the truth. Because this is my truth. This is what illumination is about. And you don't tell no to this. You can't negate it. So if people would write these false light comments, I would challenge them. I would say, no, this is not what this is about. You're bringing falseness to my teaching because you're putting it out there in the comments. And it's not done in any kind of violent way. It's just demonstrating, like, look, there's more. Just go and look deeper. And some people don't want to. And then they leave, and then they make it all about you. And I've already told you, it's challenging sometimes to embrace this. That your own perceptions are maybe not like the highest ideal of life. And it sometimes indicates ideology instead of reality of spirit and merging into matter. There has to be no more separation. Yes, the physical human self has suffered tremendously on the behalf of spirit, and sometimes we're very angry. I get angry at spirit. I know my spirit is super powerful. I can now go and stand there on the top of a mountain cliff and instantly enter the spiral of my Aurea self, which is my powerful spirit self. But I will often tell my spirit, no, this is not all that life is about. And spirit knows, it's like basically talking to myself. Like I have to verbalize it because I know it, right? But this is not all that this is about. Like the human child needs comfort, needs stability, needs a safe home, it needs an environment, needs companionship, right? It needs all these things, but it now wants them in this illumined way. It wants these to be aligned with its illumined nature. And because this is a process to walk through, and it's intense and it's difficult at times, and it requires a tremendous amount of life force, people who have not gone through this, they don't understand. And when they're acting out in this way, literally imagine, besides all the difficult work you're doing, then people acting out, and it's like, what the heck, just leave me alone. I'm just trying to do good here in my own way. That's all I can do. And then there's people acting out, and acting selfishly, to be honest, makes it even more difficult. And it's because the lack of awareness. It's because of this false narrative and perspective, which is like being stubborn as a goat, and I'm stubborn in a good way, because I'm stubborn in a way that I will fight for the truth until the last thread of me is still alive and breathing here. And my truth is illumined truth, which is bringing the essence of life into everything that was ever damaged and hurt and oppressed and worked against. And that's when my life is maybe more difficult than lifetimes of others who are maybe having more easy life. And maybe in a few years, their lives are not as easy anymore because they then step onto this path. But it doesn't mean it's going to be like that way forever. I'm sure that one day I'm going to be sitting with you fully on the other side, and we're going to have a beautiful conversation, perhaps, maybe even physically outdoors in nature. Because remember, I really wanted to do these life force retreats, but I guess I was in time. I guess this needed to happen first. And there's a lot of people who come to me and say, oh, I just want to know more about you, and I want to connect and this and that. Like, literally, I can't. Look at this. This takes all of me, takes all of my life force. I don't have so much left for conversations on one-on-one. And my inner child yearns for it, yes. But it is where it is, and I have to embrace reality now as it is. So I'm really feeling maybe one day, when the stage comes, we're going to be gathered somehow in this space where I am, where we are. It's going to be a beautiful light-filled experience. And it's almost like that laughter once you've been through hell and back. And it's like that. I was victorious. I didn't surrender. I didn't quit. Partially at times, but that was like giving in. Like when I give up, I'm very close to giving in. And when I'm in the giving in, usually a breakthrough happens, like a piercing through another veil, and another happens, which is a part of the process, as I've indicated today. So yeah, I'm in this intense process. Like I said, I don't know how much more I'll be able to share in the coming times, because I might be moving soon. I really keep my fingers crossed. It was very difficult for us because it was like a lot of oppression there. But I used all my life force for this, and there wasn't much left, so I wasn't doing things like personal services, things I really love to do, and I'm very good at it. I've done a tremendous amount of them before. So once I'm on the other side and I move, I hope we can start that back up. So for those of you who'd be interested. And yes, until then, continue to anoint the beloved, because it's a part of what resurrects the flame each time more and more. And we'll talk about this more for those of you who are on Patreon or are thinking about it or are having an inspiration to join the group. Ever so lightly tread on this planet and know yourself. Always know yourself. I sometimes feel like I've lost myself completely, but it's just a feeling. It's like before this new penetration happens, right? And you never lose yourself. It's just something under the lid cap, and then it's being reactivated. It comes into resurgent phase, and then you resurrect. So that's all it's about. And I wanted to share this with you. And it's been difficult because, like I said, a lot of people felt, oh, the beloved, it's like a distant dream. But it's what we're doing within ourselves. And then the result of the physical demonstration, what spirit brings to us, it's not like someone bringing it. It's like literally your creation. That's what Illumined Union is. You're creating that. Because you become spirit. You see the difference? You're not just manifesting something or a condition or a person. You're literally entering into the very essence of creation. And you're defying every law made by false governance. You're defying it. And because of that, you are given the sovereign right to become your own self-born. So that's what I'm going to talk about again in the transmission for this month. I'll see you. And I'll see those of you who are not on Patreon, which is most of you probably. There's a small group. But until then, until next time, I hope we meet again soon. And please, prayers and keep your fingers crossed and make this transition safely. It's quite a lot of physical strain for me and on my body. So I think I look like a teenager now. Time to build my feminine, constitution back soon, I hope. It just took a lot of, this was stressful for me. It took a toll on my body. It is what it is. And I just demonstrate the path as it is, always out in the open. I never cover up anything. And like I said, there's usually this separation. And in most spiritual teachers, what I experience is they have this very warm feeling when it comes to their work. But sometimes as people, as personas, they can be very cold. It's like they're not fully the beloved yet. They haven't unified all their aspects. Like for me, is you see what you get and you get what you see. But the difficulty in this is that people take you too lightly because you come out not so much as a figure, right, of this authority. You come out more as a best friend. And that's what I think all illumined beings are. We're friends, we're companions in that way. Not in the possessive way, which we've talked about in the past video, but it's like, every being would come and join you on your path and walk a few steps with you, and they're your comrade, they're your companion. They don't see you as any lower or they're above you, but they would choose to walk with you when they would feel like it and when your commitment is there. Because a lot of us, we have to filtrate through people who are not willing to do the work. They just want your energy and attention, and in that instance, you might come out as... But you have to do that. Like, you can't just accept everyone because you have to see through their purest intention, whether they're really pure or not. Their truest intention. So I've often noticed that there's a disintegration. There's not like this full connectivity within many spiritual teachers. Like what the image they present, it's very warm when they talk about the things they love, right? This spirituality, this realm. And then when you meet them, like physically, it's like totally different person. It's like, how did this happen? They're still not fully integrated being yet. You see what I mean? It's like when you're integrated being, you are purely Christ. You're not Christ in the comfort of, this and that. Like when you work and you talk about it, then you're like I'm very to the point, but that's not the same as being cold. I can be like this. And sometimes you have to be like that because when people don't get it, then they're like poking at you. You have to be discerning and authoritarian in your own way, like sticking within this presence. Right, your own inner sovereign. But I always tell this to people who are willing to approach with purest respect. They're always going to get to the soft core, and I call this the soft part. This is me, this Aurea within me, this blissful sharing. And people who are very respectful and they somehow find a way to pierce through that, they're going to get to that soft and loving because they are there. And then there's people who are not, and they're like trying to. It's almost like you're trying to crack the ice. You can't do it this way. It's like you're needing to melt it, like with gentle nature and softness. So that's how this happens. And that's why I'm saying that Christ is not like the spiritual, it's Christ embodiment or spiritual teachers are two different things for me altogether. Like, there's a lot of spiritual teachers on this planet, of course, assuredly so. But there's so few who are actually on this path of embodying the Christ. And there's no difference between them because their spirit and the body and the child are one. They're so unified. And people would feel that. And they would feel your warmth and your love. But people who are not yet ready, they would abuse it. It's like they want to play with it. It's like, no. You don't play until you get your own playground settled and weeded out and taken care of, right? In that beautiful space of cohesive presence that you know yourself to be you and you know the other to be them, and you can share in this companionship that's truly illumined. So anyway, too much, right? Too long as always. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may our paths cross in divine timing as always. Bye for now.